Hi guys, so our lesson today is to build on what we've been learning, which is converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. Our last lesson was that you had to memorize some of those. Now in this lesson we're going to learn the math to be able to do that. So let's get right into this. So again, our goal is to be able to convert from fractions to decimals to percents. So the first one, if I have a fraction, I'm going to use one that we're familiar with. Let's say we have the fraction 2/5. Now we already know, because this is one that we memorized, that it should be 0.4. Well, in order to do this, we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So if we have a fraction and we want to go to a decimal, we're going to divide numerator by denominator. Okay? So I'm going to take my 2 and put that inside my division house, and my 5 outside of my division house. Now, of course, 5 doesn't divide into 2, so we know what to do. We add a decimal point and a 0, and we raise that decimal point to the roof. Now we can do it. 5 divides into 20 4 times. 4 times 5 is 20, so we do our subtraction, and we get 0. So we know that the fraction 2/5 equals 4/10, 0.4. Okay, now they're not always that simple, of course. So let's look at one that's a little bit harder, like 5/11. Let's say we have the fraction 5/11. Let me draw kind of a squiggly line here so we don't get our work confused. All right, so I'm going to take, again, my process is take the numerator and divide it by the denominator. I'm going to take my 5 and divide it by my 11. Add a decimal point and a 0. Bring my decimal point up. 11 divides into 50 4 times. 4 times 11 is 44. Do my subtraction and I get 4 from 10, which is 6. Add another decimal point, bring it down. 11 divides into 60 5 times. 11 times 5 is 55. Do my subtraction. Add a 0. Bring it down, and now we're going to see what happens here. 11 divides into 50. Oh wait, we've done that problem before. 4 times. 4 times 11 is 44. Subtract, and we get 6, and we're going to see a pattern developing here. Add another 0. Bring it down. 11 divides into 60 5 times. Subtract, and there we're back at 4 again. So you can see, sorry, at 5 again, you can see that we're going to have this repeating pattern, 0.45, 45, 45, 45. And I know a lot of you already know what to do with that. And you know then that we would write that 5/11 is equal to 45/100 repeating, where the 4 5 is just going to keep repeating over and over again. No matter how many times we do that problem, we're going to get 4 5 4 5 4 5 4 5. Okay, now I'm going to skip this middle one for a minute and bump down to this decimal to a percent. So if we have a decimal and we want to change it to a percent, it's very, very easy. We're going to multiply by 100, but we don't actually have to do any multiplication, because anytime we multiply by 100, we just wind up moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. So I'll take these numbers that we have up here. We found out that 2/5 was equal to 4/10. So if we have 4/10 and we want to change that decimal to a percent, we're going to move that decimal point over 2 places to the right. 1, 2. So you can see in this situation we have an empty space, and since this is not a repeating decimal, we can add our 0 here, and we see that 0.4 as a percent is equal to 40%. Now again, that's one of them that we memorized, so you knew that already. Let's look at an example like 5/11 where we got 0.45 repeating. We move our decimal point 2 places, and we see that that's 45%, but it's really not exactly equal to 45%, because we know that after this decimal point, we would have the repeating part of this again, 4 5. So just to make sure that we show that, we want to put that repeating part in there. That's like we had 33 and 0.3 repeating, for 1/3 and 66.6 repeating for 2/3. Same thing here. This is 45.45 repeating percent. So we want to make sure if it is a repeating decimal that we put at least part of the repeater in there so that people don't think we're exactly at 45%. Okay, so we've done fraction to decimal, we've done decimal to percent. Now I'm going to show you fraction to percent. And the reason I waited is because we have to combine these two steps to get to a percent. So what we would do is we would take our fraction, we would make it our decimal, and then from the decimal we would make it our percent. So we've already done this one, really. We've already done all the work that we need to know how to do this one. So let's take a different number. Let's take one we know. Let's take 3/5, and we're going to change that to a percent. So the first thing we do is we change it to a decimal. Five divides into 30 6 times. So we know that 3/5 equals the decimal 6/10. But if we want to change that to a percent, which is where we're going here, we want to move that decimal point 1, 2 places, so we would fill in with a 0. So this is going to be 60% as our final answer. So 3/5 is the percent, 60%. All right, again, these get a little bit harder, so let's look at one that's just a little bit harder than that. Now let's look at one like 7/9, 7/9. Okay, so we're going to take 7 and divide it by 9. We add our decimal point and our 0, raise the decimal point to the roof. 9 divides into 70 7 times. 7 times 9 is 63. Do my subtraction. And you probably are already aware that this is going to be one of those repeating patterns. So you can see that we're just going to keep getting 7 repeating. All right, so we've done the first part. We've changed to go from a fraction to a percent. First we had to go to the decimal form. So now 7/9 is going to be 0.7 repeating. So I have to move that decimal point 1, 2, but remember this won't be a 0 here because we have 0.7 repeating, so this will be a 7. And this is a situation where we want to show that we've got 7 coming after. So this is 77.7 or 7/10 repeating percent. All right, so let's put in a little bit of a note over here. So to go from a percent to a fraction, to go from a fraction to a percent, I'm going to draw another arrow in here. So fraction to percent, we want to convert, we want to do two jobs, convert to a decimal, then convert to a percent. So convert to a decimal, we know how to do that. We divide our denominator by our numerator by our denominator. Okay, numerator divided by denominator, and then we convert to a percent, and that's just moving our decimal point 2 places to the right. Okay, so to go from a fraction to a percent, and that's the hardest one here, so you've got to do all of this work. We're going to divide the numerator by the denominator, and then we'll move that decimal point 2 places. All right, a few more. Let's look over here. So a decimal to a fraction. Okay, so let's say we have the decimal 0 and 731 thousandths. So what we're going to do, we're going from a decimal here to a fraction. I'm going to draw another arrow in. And what we're going to do on these is we're going to read it, write it, and reduce it. So first we'll read it correctly. Then we'll write down what we say, and then we'll reduce it if we can. Read it, write it, reduce it. That's decimal to fraction. So I said this is 731 thousandths. That's what I write down. 731 over 1,000. 731 thousandths. This one can't be reduced, so I'm done. Let's look at one that can be reduced, one we're familiar with. Let's look at 0 and 2/10. 2/10. So we write down 2/10. That's the read it, 0 and 2/10. There's the write it. Now reduce it. Both of these can be divided by 2. And we see that this is equal to 1/5, 1/5. Alrighty. Now, if we want to go from a percent to a fraction, we've got 35%, and we want to make that a fraction. So, in order to go from a percent to a fraction, we're going to put the percent over 100 and simplify, because percent simply means, this right here means out of 100. So anytime you see that percent sign, you can always make this number a fraction out of 100. Even if it's a number bigger than 100, you can still do this. So 35 over 100, and of course we have to reduce that if we can. So simplify, sorry. We're going to divide both of these by 5. And 35 divided by 5 is 7, and 100 divided by 5 is 20, and then that one's in lowest terms. All right, last one, percent to decimal. So for our percent to our decimal, we're going to take a percent, let's say 36 4/10%, and we're going to do the reverse of what we did last time. We're going from a percent to a decimal. Instead of moving the decimal point 2 places to the right, we're going to divide by 100 or move the decimal point 2 places to the left. And so we would take this decimal point and go zippity-doo-dah, and 36 4/10% is the decimal 364 thousandths. All right, you have done all of the problems that you need to do, so I will see you with these completed notes in class.